She warned him once the Deathworld girl's power turned the alien bully to Part 1. The human anomaly. The hallways of Stellar Academy gleamed with polished metal and crystal. Students from 100 different worlds walked between classes, their voices mixing into a chorus of alien languages. Some had scales, others had fur. Some floated on anti-gravity fields while others walked on 6 legs. Among them, Mira Chen looked painfully ordinary. She was 19 years old, with dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her brown eyes stayed focused on the floor as she walked. Her uniform was clean and pressed, but somehow she still looked out of place. That was the problem with being human at Stellar Academy. There were only 3 humans in the entire school, and everyone knew they came from a Deathworld Earth. The name made most aliens shudder. Mira found her usual seat in the back of Professor Velmora's diplomacy class. The professor was an Inthari, with silver skin and 4 arms that moved gracefully as she taught. Mira liked this class. She could sit quietly and listen without drawing attention. Today we discuss conflict resolution between species with different communication styles, Professor Velmora announced. Her voice had a musical quality that most students found soothing. Mira opened her datapad and began taking notes. She was 3 sentences in when she felt it. A pressure against her mind, like invisible hands pushing on her skull. She gripped her desk and kept her eyes down. Krathsur was doing it again. He sat 4 rows ahead, his crystalline skin catching the light. The Vextal were tall and broad, their bodies covered in geometric patterns that shifted colors with their moods. They were also powerful psionics. Krathsur came from a noble family, and he never let anyone forget it. The pressure increased. Myra's vision blurred at the edges. She took slow breaths and focused on her counting meditation. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pressure was just sensation. She could handle sensation. After 30 seconds, Krathsur got bored and released her. Mira heard him laugh quietly with his friends. This was his favorite game lately. He would use his psionic abilities to cause pain or discomfort, always careful to stop before it became serious enough to report class ended. Mira gathered her things quickly and headed for the door. Mira, a moment please, Professor Velmora called. Mira's stomach tightened. But she approached the professor's desk. The other students filed out, though Krathsur lingered near the doorway, pretending to read his datapad. How are you adjusting to the academy? Professor Velmora asked. Her large eyes studied Myra with concern. Fine, Professor. Thank you. In your medical scans. I noticed some unusual readings in your last health check. Mira's hands clenched. The doctors said humans sometimes confuse the scanners. Our biology is different. Professor Velmora was quiet for a moment. If you ever need to talk, my office is open. Thank you, Professor. Myra left quickly. She had 1 hour before her next class, which meant 1 hour to hide. She took the long route to the observation deck, checking twice to make sure no one followed her. The observation deck was her favorite place on the station. One entire wall was transparent, showing the stars beyond. A small planet hung in the distance, blue and green and beautiful. Mira sat on the floor with her back against the wall and closed her eyes. This was supposed to be an honor. 3 humans selected to attend Stellar Academy to represent Earth in the wider galaxy, to prove that Deathworlders could be civilized. Instead, Myra spent every day trying not to break. Oh well. The little human hides alone. Myra's eyes snapped open. Krathsur stood in the doorway, his crystalline face showing patterns of amusement. 2 of his friends flanked him, blocking the exit. I'm not bothering anyone, Mira said quietly. Please leave me alone. This is a public space, Krathsur said. He walked closer, each step deliberate. I can be here if I want. Mira stood up. Then I'll go. No. The word cracked like a whip. Psionic pressure slammed into Mira, driving her back against the wall. She gasped, her knees buckling. Krathsar's friends laughed. You know what I find interesting about humans? Krathsar continued, walking in a slow circle. Your world tried to kill you every day. Storms, predators, diseases, radiation. Yet somehow you survived. You must be tougher than you look. The pressure increased. Mira's legs shook. Her suppressant medication was wearing off early. She had taken it this morning, but Krathzer's constant attacks were burning through it too fast. Or maybe Krathzer said, leaning down until his face was level with hers, "You're just good at running away." Something flickered in Mira's chest, a warmth that wanted to spread. She pushed it down, locked it away. "Not here. Not now, please," Myra said through gritted teeth. "Leave me alone. I won't warn you again." The words came out steadier than she felt. For a moment, Krathzer's expression showed surprise. Then he laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Warn me? You warn me?" He released the pressure suddenly, and Mira collapsed to her hands and knees. Pathetic. Krathzer and his friends left, their laughter echoing down the corridor. Mira stayed on the floor, breathing hard. Her hands trembled. Inside her chest, that warmth pulsed like a second heartbeat. In the doorway, a small, furry student peeked in cautiously. Jex was a Quillen, barely 3 feet tall, with large eyes. "Mira, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Jex." "That wasn't fine. You should report him." Myra stood slowly. "His family is powerful. Nothing would happen." "Then what will you do?" Mira looked at her hands. For just a second, so brief that Jex might have imagined it, a flicker of golden light danced across her fingertips. "I gave him his first warning," Myra said quietly. "I hope he listens," but she knew he wouldn't. Bullies like Krathzer never did, far across the station. In her private office, Professor Velmora reviewed Mira's medical file. The readings were not confusing. They were terrifying. The human girl was registering energy levels that should be impossible for organic tissue. "Professor?" Velmora opened a restricted database and typed in her security clearance. The file that appeared made her blood run cold. Omega Protocol classifies. Humanability class. Energy absorption. Manipulation threat. Level. Extrema status. Suppressed medication. Aracu. Iriditha. Professor looked at the date of Myra's last medication refill. Then she looked at the date of Krathzer's first reported harassment. They overlapped. "Oh no," Professor Velmora whispered. She reached for her communicator to call the human embassy. They needed to resupply Mira's medication immediately, but it was already too late. The countdown had started the moment Krathzer decided to make an enemy of the quiet human girl. He had no idea what he had awakened. End of part 1. She warned him once the Deathworld. Girl's power turned the alien bully to ash ###. Part 2. The warning ignored word spread fast through Stellar Academy. By the next morning, everyone knew about the confrontation on the observation deck. Students whispered in corners, their voices dropping when Mira walked past. Some looked at her with pity, others with a strange new respect. She had threatened Krathzer, a noble to his face. That took either courage or stupidity. No one was sure which. Krathzer himself seemed to find the whole thing hilarious. "The human warned me," he announced to his friends at breakfast. Loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. Can you imagine? A creature from a backwater death world, warning me. His friends laughed on cue. Mira, sitting alone 3 tables away, kept her eyes on her food. The NutriPaste was designed to be acceptable to most species, which meant it tasted like nothing at all. She ate mechanically, not really tasting it. Jex slid into the seat across from her. The small Quillen looked nervous, his fur fluffed up with anxiety. "Shouldn't sit with me," Mira said quietly. "It'll make you a target. You saved me last week when those upperclassmen were teasing me. I'm not going to abandon you now." Jex pushed his tray around. "Besides, maybe if we're together, he'll think twice." Mira didn't have the heart to tell him that Krathzer would just see 2 targets instead of 1 in xenobiology class. Professor Talvin discussed Earth's classification. The professor was a Greth, insectoid and precise, who believed in cold, hard facts. "Earth is rated a Class 9 death world," Professor Talvin said, projecting an image of the blue planet. "Only 12 known worlds in the galaxy have this rating or higher. The gravity is twice galactic standard. The atmosphere contains poisonous oxygen at dangerous levels. The dominant predators have evolved specifically to hunt the dominant prey species. A student raised a tentacle. But humans are the dominant species now, correct? Indeed, humans evolved as both predator and prey. They developed persistence hunting, tool use, and social cooperation to survive. The fact they reached sentience at all is remarkable. The fact they developed space travel is borderline miraculous. Mira felt eyes turning toward her. She kept her expression neutral. Are all humans dangerous? Another student asked. Professor Talvin's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Define dangerous. Humans are fragile compared to many species. Their bones break easily. Their skin tears. They die from infections we would barely notice. But they're also persistent, adaptable, and remarkably difficult to discourage. I would not call them dangerous. I would call them surprising. After class, Krathzer made sure to bump into Mira in the hallway. The impact sent her stumbling into the wall. His friends created a barrier with their bodies, so no one could see clearly. Oops, Krathzer said, his voice dripping with false concern. These human bones are so fragile. You should be more careful. Mira's shoulder throbbed where it had hit the wall. She straightened carefully. Please stop. Stop what? Walking in hallways? He leaned closer. Maybe you should go back to your Deathworld if you can't handle civilized society. That warmth flickered in Mira's chest again, stronger this time. She forced it down through sheer willpower. Her medication would refill in 3 days. She just had to last 3 more days. Not going to ask again, Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leave me alone, or what? Krathzer's patterns shifted to aggressive reds and oranges. You'll warn me again? I'm terrified. His friends laughed. Mira walked away, her hands clenched into fists. Behind her, she heard Krathzar say something that made his friends laugh harder. She didn't look back. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. The station ran on a standard cycle, with lights dimming to simulate night, but her body didn't care. She got up and made her way to the station's high-gravity training room. Most species couldn't use this room. The gravity was set to Earth normal, which meant twice what the rest of the station maintained. Mira entered her access code and stepped inside. The weight hit her immediately, familiar and grounding. This was the gravity she had grown up with. Her bones knew this pressure. Her muscles remembered this load. She started running on the track, pushing herself until her lungs burned and her legs screamed. This was control. This was focus. This was keeping the warmth locked down where it couldn't hurt anyone. She ran for an hour before she noticed the figure watching from the observation window. Professor Velmora stood there, her silver face unreadable. Their eyes met for a moment, then the professor walked away. Mira slowed to a walk, then collapsed on a bench. Her hands were shaking again. Not from exhaustion. From the effort of holding everything in, the next day brought a new humiliation. Mira arrived at her applied diplomacy class to find. Krathzer had used his family influence to have her removed from his project group. She was assigned to work alone instead. Sorry, one of her former group mates whispered. His father contacted the dean. We couldn't argue. The project was a diplomatic simulation where students had to negotiate a trade agreement between rival factions. Doing it alone meant playing all the roles herself, which was nearly impossible. When Professor Velmora announced the presentations would be in 2 days, Mira felt something inside her crack, just a little. She worked through the night, building a scenario that could function with one participant. It wasn't good, but it was all she could manage. During the presentation, she stood in front of the class and delivered her simulation. Krathzer watched with a smile. Halfway through Mira's presentation, her datapad started glitching. Images appeared out of order. Her carefully written dialogue vanished. The whole thing fell apart in real dash time. Professor Velmora frowned. Technical difficulties? Mira, you can restart, no need, Krathzer said, standing up. His patterns showed smug satisfaction. I think we've seen enough to grade this fairly. Myra looked at her datapad. In the reflection of the screen, she saw Kratzer's hand positioned in a specific way. A psionic manipulation gesture. He had corrupted her files remotely during the presentation. The class was silent. Everyone understood what had happened. No one said anything. Mira walked back to her seat on unsteady legs. As she passed Kratzer's desk, she stopped. Her voice came out very quiet, but every student in the room heard it clearly. This is your second chance. Stop now. Kratzer's patterns flashed surprise, then anger. Did you just threaten me? Again, Mira didn't answer. She sat down and stared at her desk until class ended. That evening, Jex found her on the observation deck. I saw what he did. We all saw it. That's cheating. You should report, I warned him, Mira interrupted. She was staring at her hands. In the starlight, they looked normal, but she could feel the energy building under her skin, pressing against the weakening barrier of her medication. Twice now. If he ignores a third warning, what happens if he ignores a third warning? Jex asked nervously. Myra was quiet for a long time. I don't know. And that scares me more than anything. That night, station security cameras recorded something impossible. At 0300 hours, a figure entered the restricted engineering section without triggering alarms. The person walked into the high radiation zone where plasma conduits fed the station's main reactor. No protective gear. No safety equipment. The figure stood in front of a conduit, where raw energy arced and crackled. Visible even to security cameras. The radiation levels in that room could kill most species in seconds. The figure raised their hands. The energy bent toward them, drawn like water to a drain. For 5 minutes. The security footage showed a human girl absorbing enough radiation to power a small ship. Then the footage corrupted. Digital snow replacing the image. By the time it cleared, the room was empty. The next morning, Mira's hands stopped shaking. The warmth in her chest was an inferno now, barely contained. She had stopped taking her medication because it wasn't working anymore. 3 days until her refill. 3 days to avoid Kratzer. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that he wouldn't leave her alone. Bullies never did. They always pushed until something broke. Mira just hoped that when she broke, she would be far enough away from other students. She hoped, but she didn't believe it. End of part 2. She warned him once the Deathworld girl's power turned the alien bully to ash hash hash. Part 3. The nature of the beast. Professor Velmora's office was small and neat, filled with artifacts from 100 worlds. Mira sat in the chair designed for human proportions, her hands folded in her lap. The professor had called her here before first period, and Mira knew why. You went into the reactor section 3 nights ago, Professor Velmora said. It wasn't a question. Mira said nothing. The camera's corrupted, but not before capturing 5 minutes of footage. 5 minutes of you standing in radiation that should have killed you instantly. The professor's 4 hands moved in a gesture of concern. Myra, I accessed your real file. The classified one. Mira's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have done that. Perhaps not. But I'm responsible for every student in this academy, and you are dangerous. Professor Velmora said it kindly, but the words still hurt. You're part of Earth's Omega Protocol? I didn't ask to be. No. The professor pulled up a holographic display. Medical readouts, genetic markers, incident reports, energy absorption and manipulation. Your body can take in almost any form of energy and store it. Radiation, heat, kinetic force, even psionic attacks. When the energy reaches a threshold, you can release it. I have it under control, Mira said, but her voice shook. Your suppressants ran out yesterday. The refill won't arrive for 2 more days. Professor Velmora leaned forward. Every time Kratzer attacks you psionically, you're forced to absorb that energy. You're a battery being charged against your will. I can handle it, can you? The professor's voice was gentle. What happens when you can't contain it anymore? Mira looked at her hands. They looked so normal, so human. People die. The silence stretched between them. There was an incident, Mira said finally. Back on Earth, I was 16. I didn't know what I was yet. Some boys cornered me after school. They had weapons, wanted to prove humans weren't as tough as the stories said. She took a shaky breath. I had been near a power plant that morning. I'd absorbed energy without meaning to. When they touched me, what happened? They burned. Not from outside. From inside? Like I cooked them with microwaves. 2 died instantly. The 3rd lived, but he'll never walk again. Mira's voice was flat, emotionless. That's when the government found me. Took me to a facility with others like me. Taught us control, gave us suppressants, taught us to drain excess energy safely, and they sent you here. They wanted to prove we could integrate. That even humans with abilities could be peaceful, useful members of galactic society. Myra laughed bitterly. I volunteered. Thought I could help humanity's reputation. Instead, I'm proving every prejudice right. Professor Velmora was quiet for a moment. You've shown remarkable restraint. Many beings would have defended themselves by now. If I defend myself, I kill. There's no middle ground. Either I contain everything or I let it all out. Mira met the professor's eyes. I gave Krathzer 2 warnings. If he pushes again, I won't be able to stop what happens. Then we'll expel him first. I'll contact the dean. His family owns 3 systems. They donate millions to this academy. I'm one human from a species that just joined Galactic Society last year. Mira stood up. We both know how that conversation ends. So what will you do? Stay in my quarters. Avoid him. Hope my medication arrives before he corners me again. Mira walked to the door, then paused. Professor, when it happens, because it will happen, I need you to know I tried. I really tried. After Mira left, Professor Velmora sat in her office for a long time. Then, she sent a priority message to Earth's embassy. The response came back 3 hours later. Medication shipment delayed due to customs inspections. Estimated arrival for days. They didn't have 4 days. Across the station, Krathzer was planning his masterpiece. He sat with his friends in the recreation area, working out details. It's a challenge of wills, he said, his patterns showing excited anticipation. Traditional Vextal ritual. Completely legal if both parties agree. She won't agree, one of his friends said. She will if I make it public. If I frame it as giving her a chance to prove humans aren't cowards. Kratzer's patterns shifted to cunning orange. She's here to represent her species. She can't refuse without humiliating all of them. What if she's actually dangerous? The rumors say lots of things. I've been hitting her with psionic pressure for weeks. She's weak, fragile, like all humans. Kratzer stood up. Tomorrow, during lunch period, the main atrium, maximum witnesses. His friends exchanged glances but said nothing. Krathzer was nobility. When nobility decided something, you agreed or you suffered. That night, Mira couldn't sleep again. The energy inside her was like a living thing, pressing against her skin from the inside. She could feel it wanting to get out, to burn, to destroy. She tried meditation, tried exercise. Nothing worked. She was a dam with cracks spreading, and the water behind her was rising at midnight. Jex found her on the observation deck. The little Quillen sat down beside her without speaking. They watched the stars together. Do you ever miss Earth? Jex asked finally. Every day. Earth tried to kill us constantly, but at least it was honest about it. Mira's laugh was hollow. Storms didn't pretend to be your friend first. Predators didn't mock you before they attacked. It was violent, but it was clean. What was it like? Growing up there. Mira thought about the mountains where she'd trained. The thin air that made every breath a challenge. The cold that could freeze flesh in minutes. The altitude that would kill most species just from lack of oxygen. Beautiful, she said. Terrible and beautiful. My teacher said humans became strong because Earth gave us no choice. Adapt or die. So we adapted. She looked at her hands again. Some of us adapted in stranger ways than others. You're not a monster, Mira. Not yet. The words came out as a whisper. Ask me again in 2 days. Jex wanted to say something comforting, but he was a prey species. His instincts were good. He could smell danger the way humans smelled smoke. And right now, sitting next to Mira, every instinct screamed at him to run. He stayed anyway. That meant something. The next morning came too fast. Mira got ready slowly, each movement careful. She felt like she was made of glass, one wrong move from shattering. The energy inside her had colors now, she could feel them. Gold and white and burning red dots. She made it through first period, made it through second period. At lunch, she planned to hide in her quarters, but as she walked through the central atrium, Kratzer's voice boomed out across the crowd. Mira Chen of Earth, I challenge you to a contest of wills. 300 students stopped what they were doing. Conversations died. All eyes turned to Mira. Standing frozen halfway across the atrium floor, Kratzer stood on the upper level, his crystalline body catching the light like a statue. His friends flanked him, and they'd clearly prepared. Cameras were positioned. Students were recording on datapads. By the traditions of my people, Kratzer announced, I offer this human a chance to prove her species has courage. A simple test. We face each other in a circle of wills. First to kneel or flee loses. He paused dramatically. Unless, of course, humans are too weak to accept. The crowd murmured. Some students shouted for Mira to refuse. Others wanted to see what would happen. Most just watched with horrified fascination. Mira stood very still. Inside her chest, the energy writhed like a caged sun. Her suppressants were gone. Her control was thread-thin. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get away from people before she detonated. But Kratzer had been clever. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every human trying to find a place in galactic society. If she ran, she proved humans were cowards. If she stayed, ... Mira looked up at Kratzer. Their eyes met across the distance. She could give him a third warning, could beg him one final time to stop this, but she knew it wouldn't matter. Bullies never learned until they got hurt. And Kratzer was about to learn a lesson that would end him. I accept, Mira said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silent atrium, everyone heard. Kratzer's patterns flashed triumph. Excellent. Prepare the circle. As students rushed to create the traditional dueling space, Jex grabbed Mira's arm. Don't do this, please. Mira looked at her friend. I gave him 2 warnings, Jex. He didn't listen. She pulled free gently. Get far away from the circle. Tell everyone to back up as far as possible. Why? Because I'm not going to be able to warn him a third time. End of part 3. She warned him once. The Deathworld girl's power turned the alien bully to ash. # part 4. The final straw. The circle was marked with light projectors, creating a ring of blue energy on the atrium floor. Traditional Vextal design meant to contain psionic forces and protect observers. Students pressed against the railings on all 3 levels, hundreds of them watching with cameras raised. Mira walked to the circle slowly. Each step felt like moving through water. The energy inside her was screaming now, begging for release. She could feel it in her bones, her blood, her breath. Every cell in her body was saturated with power that had nowhere to go. Kratzer stood on the opposite side of the circle, his patterns showing confident blue and purple. He was surrounded by his friends, all of them laughing and joking. This was entertainment to them. A human about to be humiliated for their amusement. Professor Velmora pushed through the crowd, her silver face tight with concern. Stop this. Both of you. This is unnecessary. The challenge was issued and accepted. Kratzer said, by Vexel law, it must proceed, unless the human wishes to forfeit. All eyes turned to Mira. She stood at the edge of the circle, perfectly still. Her breathing had changed, become rhythmic. In, out, like meditation. Like the breathing exercises her teachers had taught her for containing the energy.
Mira
said quietly, I'll see this through. Professor Velmora grabbed her arm. Mira, please. Your medication, I know. Mira's eyes met the professor's, and for just a moment they flickered with golden light. Get everyone as far back as you can. Especially Jex. Make sure he's safe. The professor started to argue, then saw something in Mira's expression that made her stop. She nodded and began ordering students to move back. Most ignored her, too excited by the spectacle. Mira stepped into the circle. Immediately, the light barriers activated, creating a cylinder of energy around both participants. The atrium's ambient noise muffled, as if she'd stepped into a bubble. Krathzar entered from the opposite side. Up close, he was enormous. Nearly 7 feet tall, his crystalline body faceted and beautiful. His patterns were swirling with anticipation. "Last chance to surrender, human?" he said. Myra said nothing. She just looked at him with those dark, calm eyes. "Fine," Krathzar raised his hands. "Let's begin." The first psionic wave hit like a physical blow. Mira felt the pressure slam into her mind, trying to crush her thoughts, force her to her knees. It was stronger than anything he'd used before. This was Krathzar unleashing his full noble bloodline, holding nothing back. The crowd gasped. Several students stumbled even outside the circle, affected by the residual force. Mira stood perfectly still. She didn't even blink. The energy inside her absorbed the psionic attack like a sponge absorbing water. She felt it add to the inferno already raging in her chest. More fuel for the fire. Krathzar's patterns flickered surprise. He attacked again, harder. Waves of psionic force that would paralyze most species. Stop their hearts, shut down their brains. Myra's hair stirred in a wind that wasn't there. Small sparks of static electricity danced across her uniform. But she didn't move. "What?" Krathzar started to say. "My turn," Mira asked. Her voice sounded strange, hollow, like it was coming from far away. She didn't attack. She just stood there, and the temperature in the circle began to rise. Krathzar felt it first. Heat radiating from the human girl, growing hotter by the second. He stepped back instinctively. "You're not even trying," he said, but his voice shook. "Is this human weakness? Is this no?" Myra's eyes opened fully, and they were glowing now. Gold and white, like molten metal. "This is human mercy. I'm giving you one last chance to yield. To walk away. To survive." The crowd had gone silent. Even those recording on datapads lowered their devices, sensing something wrong. "I warned you," Mira continued. Her voice had harmonics now, vibrating at frequencies that made nearby equipment hum. "Twice before, I told you to stop. You didn't listen? You'd never listen." Krathzar's patterns shifted rapidly through colors. Confusion, fear, anger, pride. The pride one. "It always did with bullies. You dare?" His voice cracked. "You dare threaten me? I am Krathzar of House Velthel. My family owns systems. You are nothing." He gathered every ounce of psionic power he possessed. Drew on ancestral strength, on bloodline gifts, on everything his noble heritage could provide. The air around him warped with the force he was channeling. "I'll crush you," he snarled. "I'll break your mind, your body, your spirit. I'll make you an example of what happens when inferior species forget their place." The psionic attack he unleashed was devastating. Pure, concentrated mental force meant to obliterate consciousness itself. The protective barriers around the circle flared, nearly shattering. Students screamed and dove for cover as the residual energy washed over them. The attack hit Mira like a tsunami. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Mira opened her eyes. She wasn't human anymore. The golden light blazed from her eyes like searchlights. Her skin began to glow, soft at first, then brighter. The air around her shimmered with heat. She looked at Krathzar, and when she spoke, her voice was layered with the sound of a furnace roar. "I warned you," the energy released, not as a blast, not as an explosion, but as pure, concentrated heat that turned the air inside the circle into plasma. The temperature spiked from comfortable to incinerating in half a second. Krathzar's triumphant expression froze. His crystalline skin, beautiful and intricate, began to glow from within. He looked down at his hands and saw them turning red, then orange, then white-hot. "Wait," he managed to say. The heat intensified. Kratzer's body, his proud crystalline form, couldn't handle the thermal stress. Fractures appeared, spreading like spiderwebs across his surface. His patterns went haywire, flashing every color at once. "I'm sorry," Mira whispered, and she sounded like herself again for just a moment. I tried to warn you, Kratzer screamed. The sound lasted less than a second before the heat reached critical levels. His crystalline body shattered. The pieces glowed white-hot, then melted, then vaporized. The thermal energy was so intense that his very molecular structure came apart. No blood, no gore. Just instant, complete conversion from matter to ash. The light was blinding. Students threw up arms to shield their eyes. Cameras overloaded and shut down. The protective barriers around the circle blazed brighter than ever before, struggling to contain the heat. Then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. The light faded. The temperature plummeted back to normal. The circle's protective barriers flickered and died. Their capacitors burned out. Mira stood in the center of the circle, unmarked, breathing heavily. Her eyes had returned to normal brown. Her skin no longer glowed. She looked completely human again. At her feet was a pile of ash and a few fragments of crystal, still glowing with residual heat. The circle itself had been permanently seared into the metal floor, the edges smooth as glass from the temperature. Of Kratzer, of House Velthel. Nothing else remained. The atrium was absolutely silent. 300 students stood frozen, unable to process what they'd witnessed. Some were crying. Others looked like they might be sick. A few had fainted from the shock. Mira swayed on her feet. She looked at her hands, then at the ash at her feet. Her face showed no expression, but her hands trembled. I warned him, she said to no one in particular. Her voice was small, broken. I warned him. 3 times. I tried. Her legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees in the center of the scorched circle, surrounded by the remains of her tormentor. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I tried. Security rushed in, weapons drawn. Professor Velmora threw herself between Mira and the guards, shouting orders. Jex tried to run to Mira, but other students held him back, afraid to get close to the human girl. Above them all, the station's emergency alarms began to wail. The automated systems had detected the thermal spike, the energy discharge, the biological signature disappearance, but they were too late. The damage was done. The warning had been ignored, and Kratzer of House Velthel had learned in his final moment. What happened when you pushed a Deathworlder too far? Mira knelt in the ash in the silence, tears streaming down her very human face. I warned him, she said again. Why didn't he listen? Why don't they ever listen? No one had an answer. End of part 4. She warned him once the Deathworld girl's power turned the alien bully to ash. Part 5. Ashes and Aftermath. The holding cell was designed for dangerous individuals. Triple reinforced walls, energy dampeners, remote monitoring. Mira sat on the simple bench and stared at her hands. They looked so normal. So harmless, they had killed someone. She knew the guards outside were armed with stun weapons. She knew Professor Velmora was arguing with Station Command. She knew that somewhere, very far away, Earth's diplomatic corps was in emergency sessions, trying to decide what to do about her. None of it felt real. None of it mattered. Kratzer was dead. She had turned him to ash in front of 300 witnesses. The door opened. 2 galactic peacekeepers entered, their armor gleaming. Behind them came an N3 judge, a human ambassador, and Professor Velmora. Mira Chen, the judge began. You are being charged with... No, the human ambassador interrupted. Ambassador Okafor was a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She's not being charged with anything until we review all evidence. She killed a student, one of the peacekeepers said. We have 300 witnesses. You have 300 witnesses to a legal challenge issued publicly, accepted by both parties. Ambassador Okafor pulled up a holographic display. Contest of Wills. Traditional Vextal ritual. Binding under galactic law once accepted. The rules state, participants face each other until one yields, or is rendered unable to continue. The human used prohibited weapons. She used no weapons. She used her own biology. The ambassador's voice was sharp. Unless you're prepared to charge every Vextal who uses psionics with carrying a weapon, every Greth who secretes acid, Every Thraxian who has natural armor? The judge's antenna twitched. The level of force was extreme. The victim attacked first. Multiple witnesses confirmed this. He struck with psionic force strong enough to affect students outside the protective circle. Ambassador Okafor pulled up more files. Furthermore, we have evidence of systematic harassment spanning 3 weeks. Psionic assault, public humiliation, academic sabotage, all targeting Miss Chen specifically. That doesn't justify murder. It wasn't murder. Professor Velmora stepped forward. It was self-defense after repeated warnings. I have 3 separate incidents documented where Mira explicitly told Krathzer to stop his harassment. The final warning was given in front of the entire atrium, recorded by multiple devices. The judge was silent for a moment. Play the recordings. They watched it all. Every camera angle, every witness statement. They watched Krathzer issue the challenge, knowing about human fragility, intending to humiliate. They watched Mira accept reluctantly. They watched her stand perfectly still as Krathzer attacked with everything he had, and they watched the moment she gave him one final chance to yield. The moment he chose pride over survival. I warned you, her voice echoed from the recordings. Twice before I told you to stop. You didn't listen? When the recordings ended, the room was quiet. Human showed restraint, the judge said slowly. She absorbed multiple psionic attacks without retaliating. She offered surrender. The deceased refused and escalated. He didn't know what she was, the peacekeeper argued. She told him, I warned you. I won't warn you again. That was her first statement. Ambassador Okafor crossed her arms. How much more clear could she be? She explicitly warned him 3 separate times. He chose to ignore those warnings. The judge looked at Mira, who hadn't spoken or moved during the entire proceeding. Miss Chen, do you have anything to say? Mira's voice was barely a whisper. I tried. I really tried not to hurt anyone. Why didn't you report the harassment through proper channels? His family is powerful. I'm one human from a species nobody trusts. Who would believe me? Mira finally looked up, her eyes red from crying. I didn't want to be a weapon. I wanted to prove humans could be peaceful. But he kept pushing and pushing, and I ran out of suppressants, and he wouldn't stop. She broke down then, sobbing. Professor Velmora moved to comfort her, but the peacekeepers blocked her path. She's a threat, one of them said. She needs to be contained or removed. She's a 19-year-old girl who defended herself after being systematically tortured, Ambassador Okafor snapped. And you're going to treat her as such. The argument continued for hours. Representatives from a dozen species weighed in. The Vextel family demanded justice. Human rights groups demanded fairness. The Academy faced potential closure over negligence. In the end, after 3 days of testimony and deliberation, the Galactic Council reached a verdict. Self-defense, the head judge announced. While the level of force was extreme, it was in direct response to an immediate threat from an individual with superior psionic abilities. The deceased was warned multiple times and chose to escalate. No charges will be filed. The Vextel family erupted in protest. Ambassador Okafor thanked the council and quietly began. Damage control? But there were conditions. New protocols were established. Humans with special classifications would be clearly identified in enrollment records. Mandatory suppressant medications would be supplied by the Academy itself, never left to shipping delays. Anti-harassment policies would be enforced regardless of family status or donations, and Myra had to decide what to do next. She sat in Professor Velmora's office, our belongings packed. I should go back to Earth. Is that what you want? The professor asked gently. It doesn't matter what I want. I killed someone. Every student who looks at me now sees a monster. Not all of them. As if on cue, there was a knock on the door. Jex entered, followed by 3 other students. A Quillen, a Greth, and a nervous-looking Inthuri. We wanted to say goodbye, Jex said. If you're leaving, you should hate me, Mira said. You saw what I did. You saw what he did, the Greth student corrected. Her mandibles clicked firmly. We saw weeks of torment. We saw you show mercy he didn't deserve. We saw you try everything else first. I stood by and watched, the Inthuri student said quietly. We all did. We were too afraid of his family to help you. That makes us complicit. You shouldn't have been forced to defend yourself alone." Mira looked at them, these students who should fear her, standing in solidarity instead. "I don't want to be dangerous." "Then stay," Jack said. "Stay and show them that humans can control their power, that you're more than your worst moment." Mira stayed. It wasn't easy. For weeks, most students avoided her. Parents contacted the academy demanding their children be kept away from the human. The Vextel family used their influence to make things difficult, but slowly. Things changed. When another student started bullying a smaller species, Mira simply stood nearby. The bully left immediately. Word spread. The Deathworld girl protected those who couldn't protect themselves. A support group formed for students who had been harassed. Mira attended, speaking about her experience. Others shared theirs. The academy was forced to confront systematic problems they had ignored. Mira began teaching meditation and control techniques to other students with dangerous abilities. A young Thraxian with acid secretion problems. A Quillan with uncontrolled empathy. They learned together. 6 months later, Mira stood on the observation deck. It was her favorite spot, the place where everything had started, where she'd given her first warning. Jex found her there, as he often did. They watched the stars in comfortable silence. "Do you regret it?" Jex asked. "Coming here?" Mira thought about that. She thought about Krathzer, the boy she'd killed. She thought about the students she'd helped since then. She thought about the changes the academy had made, the bullies who now thought twice before acting. "I regret that he died," she said finally. "I regret that he pushed me so far I couldn't hold back. But I don't regret standing up. I don't regret the warnings. I gave him every chance. Do you think it will happen again?" Myra looked at her hands. She wore a bracelet now, a medical device that monitored her energy levels. Her suppressants were provided daily by the Academy Medical Center. She had learned better control, better techniques for bleeding off excess power safely. "I hope not," she said. "But if it does, I'll make sure I warn them first." 3 times, just like before. Down in the main atrium, a new student was being cornered by an upperclassman. The bully was demanding the smaller student do his homework. Several students watched nervously, unsure what to do. Then someone said quietly, "Isn't that Mira's spot?" The bully turned. Mira was standing on the upper level, just watching. She wasn't threatening, wasn't moving, just observing. The bully went pale. He remembered the stories. The Deathworld girl, the one who had warned someone once, the one who had turned a noble to ash. "Sorry," the bully muttered quickly, backing away. "Wrong person. My mistake." The smaller student looked up at Mira and waved timidly. Mira waved back, then returned to watching the stars. A year later, a Vextel delegation visited the academy. Not Kratzer's family, but others from his species. They wanted to understand what had happened, to prevent similar tragedies. Mira met with them privately. She explained the harassment, the warnings, the systematic failures. She spoke about her nature, her abilities, her desperate attempts to control herself.